All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College World podcast. Today, me and Nick here doing our preview and prediction for the 2023 Duke Blue Devils. Look at this coaching staff: Mike Elko, former Texas A&M defensive coordinator, 9-4 in his first season. Kevin Johns, fifth different spot in the last decade. He's been all over the place. He's going to be settling down here in his second year as the Duke offensive play caller. Tyler Santucci, former Texas A&M linebacker coach, is going to be the defensive play caller. The Blue Devils return a conference-high 17 starters and Elko's 9 wins, the most since 2013 in his first season. Again, we might add. Looking at this offense, Nick, this is a unit that certainly surprised a lot of people. Obviously on paper they had some impressive talent, but 32nd in scoring offense. They had phenomenal balance, and they only lose 9 players in the portal, 6 from the offensive line. So a little bit of turnover there. They do add 4 players, 2 of them coming up front. Returning 9 starters on this side of the ball is the most production in the conference. The offensive line was very good a season ago. That turnover was going to be something to monitor. But I think the biggest key here is going to be Riley Leonard. This is a player that is a true dual threat, good acceleration and speed as a runner. Some nice breakaway speed, that is. Great vision, good movements in the pocket. Has showcased some really good touch. Did good work as a deep ball thrower last year. Very impressed by Riley Leonard. Jalen Calhoun, this is a guy I thought would have transferred a long time ago for better and bigger things. He's been around forever. He's a slot magician. He's great at getting open in the middle of the field. Very effective after the catch. A veteran leader at 5'11", 189. Ex-quarterback Jordan Moore. He was utilized a lot to the boundary this past year and as an underneath pass catcher. I thought he was pretty good in the open field. Very shallow route runner, so that's something he certainly needs to work on. Only 1 drop this past year on 87 targets, so hopefully he spent this offseason developing his route tree and some separation skills. I think sky high for Jordan Moore. This is an offense, Nick, that I think's passing attack is certainly going to be a tone setter. We'll talk about the run game in a minute. They also get Eli Pancol back. Depth isn't great at wide receiver, but this trio, along with the quarterback throwing to him, I think it's a very solid starting point here for the Duke Blue Devils.
I absolutely love this, trio for sure. I think Calhoun's a fantastic wide receiver. Led the team in receiving yards last year, 873 yards, 14.1 yards per catch, and 4 scores for him. Moore has a lot to offer, right? I think Jordan Moore is a very talented piece that they return with 656 receiving yards. He kind of fits in that wide receiver Y role, kind of fits there perfectly. He had 5 touchdowns, tied for the team lead. Another guy I like, Eli Pancol as well, nearly 350 yards receiving, 15.1 yards per catch. I think he's going to break out this year. He has a way to step up. So this is a good wide receiving trio here. I like this trio for sure. I think their quarterback play is fantastic. Riley Leonard really kind of broke out last year, 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, plus the 13 on the ground. I mean, he is a true dual threat quarterback in every sense. Nearly 3,000 yards passing, 63% completion percentage, and the 20-6 TD to INT ratio. I mean, the numbers are fantastic on Leonard. I really like what he's done so far at Duke, and I think it's a great quarterback kind of lead them through this ACC schedule, and I think he's a really talented dual threat. He's got a lot of skill set in his tool set.
They also do return Shamir Hoggins and Jontavius Robinson. So altogether, top 5 wide receivers from a year ago are all back. Tight end Nicky Dalton, he had 21 grabs and 4 touchdowns. Overall, he struggled mightily, though. I thought he was very effective down the seam on occasion. Looking at this ground game, though, Jordan Waters, this is a guy who's a bigger back with a low center of gravity. Really gets through the line of scrimmage well. Improved pass catcher, a nice short yardage back at 6'2", 214. Jarquez Moore, he's a shiftier back that can move laterally well while moving forward. He thrives with following a lead puller, and he just hits the gas. Duke calls those type of plays very often, and Jalen Coleman, another efficient runner with some great ball security. This is a great trio, and I think Kevin Johns is a guy who uses plenty of wide formations and motions. I think, put together all the talent they have here, I think they're pretty deep at both positional groups, and the offensive line, we'll talk about them in a minute, but I think altogether, A- for me, and the offensive line is only going to continue to add on to that, but I really like what Duke has here at all positional groups, Nick.
Definitely very deep at all positional groups. I love what this team has to offer. Jarquez Moore, very talented running back. I like what he can do, 6.4 yards per carry last year, 5 scores for him. Jordan Waters, he's a nice, kind of dual threat back. He had 100 yards receiving last year and 16 catches, so I'd like to see him get a few more targets this year. Nearly 600 yards on the ground and 8 scores for him. So I think there's a lot of talent, a lot of depth at running back as well. The guys farther down the depth chart like Jalen Coleman as well, who's a graduate senior, who's got some nice experience, good leadership. As long as they can sort out the question marks at the offensive line, this could be a very talented offense that could be scoring a ton of points in the ACC this year.
Yeah, they lose right tackle Andre Harris, who was good for them. They do pick up Ben Hotnick from Princeton. He was a guard who was also a pretty sound player, especially as a pass blocker, 6'4", 300. He would potentially slot on the inside. Jake Hornibrook as well, coming over from Stanford, nearly 2,000 snaps in his 4 years with the Cardinals, 6'5", 308. So some veteran guys that are going to come in here, likely going to be some plug-and-play guys. Justin Pickett was a sound run blocker on the interior. Jacob Monk at center. He is a veteran, but he may be the odd man out here. out of all the guys we just mentioned. And Graham Barton, one of the nation's top tackles, really fires off the snap, some good flexibility, great powerful punch. I thought he was phenomenal in both facets of his game, run and pass blocking, 6'4", 311. There's certainly, like we just alluded to a minute ago, a good bit of turnover here. And maybe depth will be tested, but Maurice McIntyre, guard, he's also back. So this is an interesting unit because there are some veterans. The right tackle spot certainly remains a question mark, though.
I agree. I think the right tackle spot's the biggest question mark here, but I think there's some talent. Graham Barton's a fantastic left tackle, senior leader, one of the best in the ACC. He's the guy you want to look at, one of the nation's top tackles, very talented piece to return. I think they did some good work in the portal. They filled some pieces in here. I am looking at the guy, Nick from Princeton. I think he's a very solid piece. Maybe slot him out to right tackle potentially. I know he's more of an interior piece, but he might have to plug in there at right tackle. I think this is a solid team. Jacob Monk as well at center potentially. Good senior leadership there.
Red zone efficiency certainly needs a boost, and of course retooling that unit up front could be a bit of a hot topic. Again, A- for me. What is your thoughts on this offense? Are you going to put it in that top tier category? Are you going to downgrade it a little bit?
I think it gets an A for me. This is a really talented offense, top to bottom. I love what Riley Leonard did last year when he got the keys to the offense. I think he's a perfect piece to have leading this offense. I love that trio at wide receiver. I think they got so much balance in the backfield. They can really kind of spread it out and attack how they want to. There's so much balance in this offense. I think it's a great kind of unit to work with here for Duke.
Now looking at the Duke defense, when they added Mike Elko, I was curious to see how good this defense would improve, immediately. And they were much better by a wide margin. They went from 39.8 points per game all the way down to 22.1. They're also better by 139 yards per game, allowed less. That was unexpected completely, Nick. This is a guy in Mike Elko who runs a very interesting defense. Third down split front is a mismatch for some of these teams. A nose and two wide nines is what that is, with some outside linebackers alongside a gunner inside linebacker. His 4-2-5 is quite effective. Various amounts of alignments, overload blitzes, stunts with the D-line, corner boundary blitzes. I mean, there's all kinds of things Elko's going to throw at you, and I think that's the biggest reason why they were able to thrive this past season in the conference. They still need to get better against the pass, which obviously that was probably going to be the hardest part for them anyways, because, a schematic change. They're also seeing a lot of turnover in that secondary this upcoming year. But I think the front seven is probably going to be the best part, mainly the defensive front for them. This is a team that was second in forced fumbles with 17. They recovered 16 of them. They're also seventh in that category in 2021. So they already know how to rip the football from opponents. That was something that they actually did quite well in that 4-21 campaign. Dwayne Carter, this is one of the top defensive tackles in the country. This guy excels at finding opposing ball carriers, really good strength and leverage, good block shedder. He's a poor tackler, so certainly he's up his fundamentals a little bit. The defensive line as a whole doesn't have overwhelming size, because Carter's only 298, 255 for O.J. Obin at defensive end. This guy has developed into a nice, sturdy pass rusher, some solid size and speed. He needs to become better in pursuit against the run, though. Jamari Franklin, he's the only guy at 300 plus at 311 pounds. Overall, it's a sound defensive line, but they're not deep in terms of playmaking. Those two guys up front are really going to have to be tone setters this year, Nick.
Dwayne Carter's a solid piece. He has to work on his tackling, but 11 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks last year, 4 pass breakups for him. He's got a really nice tool set there. I like what he can do when he gets after the quarterback and get in the backfield. Very talented in the backfield. RJ Obin, I like what he can do. 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks for him, plus 2 forced fumbles. I like him. A little smaller, but the 20 tackles total for him is not bad. I like to see that improve that number. And like you said, Jamon Franklin, the biggest guy on this team, 26 total tackles for him, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, 5 pass breakups. These guys can bat the ball down. I like the talent they have here. I think these 3 guys together are very talented pieces. I like the way they get after the quarterback.
Now, looking at the linebacking spot, this really isn't the greatest in the conference, probably middle of the pack, maybe below average. Dorian Masu, ball hawk abilities and coverage, but he was drastically poor in that area this past year, so he really didn't get to showcase his talents. Maybe that was also virtue of a schematic change. Some good pursuit against the run, though, as a disrupting rusher at 6'2", 225. Cam Dillon spent his first 2 years at Columbia, the last season as a starter. Has been a quite effective havoc pass rusher. He's also in that 6'2", 229 area. I'm very interested to see how this linebacking core does this year. Again, a 4-2-5 front. There's only going to be 2 guys rolling it out. I think depth will be tested this year. I think playmaking in the middle also will be something to monitor because these guys are veterans. But I didn't really see much from them last year. Do you expect that to continue, or think Elko will get this positional group corrected?
I would hope you get this positional group corrected, but I think I am concerned a little bit here. I think, Cam Dillon's a solid piece. I like what he can do with the 61 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. But outside of him, the drop-off is there. Joshua Pickett's not a bad piece to have, 7 pass breakups plus 41 total tackles for him. I just think the depth is really not there, and once you get past that, you kind of get concerned about the depth. Muncie as well is not a bad piece, but I think that he needs to work on his tackling ability as well. He only had 40 44 total tackles this past season. This is definitely the weakest part of this defense and certainly the weakest part of this Duke team.
Now, this secondary, this football team as a whole on this side of the ball returns 8 starters, but there's a good bit of turnover here in the back end. Brandon Johnson, one of their top returnees. He has a knack for finding the football. He was also great off the edge as the team's leading sack getter. Does a good job fighting through some blocks, 5'10", 180. Plenty of aggressiveness for being maybe a little bit undersized. I thought he was a coverage asset in the slot. Wasn't the most polished tackler or the greatest run defenders, though. But he was a great slot blitzer, so he's really a good scheme fit here for what Elko wants to accomplish. Jalen Stinson, another returnee. He was also an all-around sound defender, one of the top tacklers on the team. A variety of alignments. He was really good versus the run. 2 guys they pick up, though. Miles Jones from Texas A&M enters his 7th season of college football. That's pretty ridiculous. A long, rangy corner, though. A zone asset. A physical run defender. He can play safety and be useful in press. So I'll be very interested to see what Jones does this year. Obviously, he's been around Elko for nearly a decade at this point. And now Blades Jr., he's also playing his 6th season of college football. Some quick feet, impressive change of direction, a nice strong punch and press. He gets beat deep way too often, though. He can be over-aggressive and get sloppy in his back pedal, but overall has some good ball skills. So I think these 2 transfers right here, they're going to be, big-time crucial keys here alongside Johnson and Stinson. The secondary overall is encouraging, but they will need to take a sizable leap as no returnees were exactly high-quality coverage guys outside of maybe Johnson. So, and they really got shredded in the intermediate range. So I think here in year 2, they're going to take a big step. I kind of said the same thing about Jeff Hafley in Boston College 2 years back, and that's exactly what happened. They took a massive leap. I'm expecting the same here from Elko in that same conference.
I like to see a huge step up from the secondary. I think Brandon Johnson's a great piece. I get concerned about the size. Obviously, like I said, 5'10", 180 is not really ideal, but he gets after the quarterback. Great in the backfield, 7.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks last year, 2 interceptions, 7 pass breakups for Johnson, including 55 total tackles. Stinson, 3rd in the team in tackles last year, 74 total tackles, and the largest returning tackler from a season ago. He had 2 interceptions as well, plus a forced fumble. I like Stinson and Johnson a lot, and the pieces they add out of the portal I think are 2 nice players to get that are veterans. Miles Jones, great veteran player. 7 years in college football. He's got some experience, super senior over there. Talented piece to add to the secondary. As long as they can improve this pass defense in the secondary, I think this defense will be a lot better. And that's saying, they improved a ton a lot here. I think they continue to step forward.
Now, in terms of grade, I'm going to go with a B. I think it's fair. They have a hopeful secondary, a good D-line. But overall, no overwhelming talents in the middle of that defense, and the size on the D-line is iffy. Now, I don't think, maybe I'm being too critical because this run defense was great last year. Look at the final 3 games of the year. Allowed only 120 on the ground to Pittsburgh, 106 to Wake Forest, and then 128 to UCF. They really kept some of those very efficient running games in check. In 217 in a blowout win over an FCS school is the most they allowed all year. They only allowed over 180 yards rushing only 3 times. And then, 2 of those wasn't a loss, of course. So definitely want to see a slight improvement in that area. But, I think maybe I'm being a little too critical on this D-line in terms of being able to stop the run. I do want to see slight improvement in that area, though. The pass defense, though, that's going to be the crucial key. Playmaking in the secondary, overall limiting big plays. I think all those things, you're going to check the box. I think you'll see a monumental improvement on this side of the ball this year.
I think there's a lot of talent on this defense. I'm in line for a big step up here. I think a B is a good grade for this defense. And, they improved a lot last year. They made a huge jump from where they were 2 seasons ago, Mike Elko's first year. And I think Mike Elko is going to continue to put the pieces into the puzzle and build this team how he wants to and get this defense clicking to be one of the best in the ACC.
Now, to the schedule preview and prediction. This is a team that went 9-4 a season ago, and all 4 games they lost were by 1 score. Now, if you look at that schedule from top to bottom, it's pretty poor. It's probably a C average schedule from a season ago, so that's something you really definitely got to monitor. The offense should continue to take leaps, though, led by a dual-threat quarterback and a greatly deep group of weapons in the bookend left tackle. The defense returns plenty of production, led by a strong run-stopping unit. The linebacking play will certainly need to progress. Struggles, not shockingly, in the secondary from a season ago, considering that schematic change. And now they have some vets in there, so it should be a substantial improvement from that unit. That's going to be the expectation. I think the defense, again, needs to cut down on some of the big plays. Overall, a very good football team that faces a more difficult schedule. I don't see it being a problem. One, Bama go 9-3, including an upset win over Clemson week 1 on a Monday night. What do you think about this schedule, Nick? Because they host Notre Dame also and NC State. I do see them losing 3 in a row there in October, which, for a good football team, that seems impossible. So that certainly might not be, a great prediction right there. But I think 9-3 overall, the back half of the schedule, I think is very favorable. I think they're going to rip off 4 wins in a row. And potentially they play their cards right. They can find themselves in Charlotte at the end of the year.
I agree. I think this team could be at 9-10 wins easily. I think the over on the win total is a very nice look for this team. I think it's a lock in most cases. I like the over on this win total a lot. I think this is a very talented team. Their schedule is very favorable. You get Clemson at home, Notre Dame at home, Pitt at home, Wake Forest at home, all teams that are pretty solid. NC State at home as well. The road splits, at Florida State's obviously a tough one, but at Louisville, at Virginia, at UConn, these are all pretty easy road trips. North Carolina could potentially be a trip up, but I think North Carolina's got their own kind of problems they got to sort out here. I love this offense. I think this offense is high flying. This defense, the secondary can cut down on the mistakes in the secondary. I think they'll be in line for a great season. I think Mike Elko is building a culture, building a program here in Durham, and I think he's got this team right where he wants them. 9-3 should easily be achievable for this team. They could potentially push 10 wins, and like you said, be competing in Charlotte for an ACC title.
The 2 road games back-to-back against FSU and Louisville to close out October. I just think the speed for that secondary, I think, is going to challenge them too much. But again, a good football team losing 3 in a row, and that being the only L's and blemishes on the schedule, seems a little unlikely. So, overall, how do you feel about that? Do you think they're going to win any of those games, or do you agree with me on the losses?
I think they'll beat Louisville. I think Louisville just has a lot of question marks in their first-year head coach and a lot of moving pieces out there in Kentucky. So I think they'll be a little bit of a question mark there. But overall, I think this team has got a fantastic outlook for them. I think they're going to continue to get better in Durham.
That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me to break down the Blue Devils.
Absolutely. I think this is a great direction this program's going. I'm glad they're getting better in college football and be able to be competitive in the ACC.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.